Dear Professor and classmates, my research project is on the Regulator Movement in the Carolina colonies. I could probably talk about this movement for a long time, so I will highlight the most important aspects. The Regulator Movement was defined as the rebellion of local farmers and workers in the frontier of the Carolinas starting around 1765 and ending in the Battle of Alamance in 1771. Although this movement was concluded 4 years before the battles of Lexington and Concord, there are many scholars that have said that this battle was the first in the Revolutionary War. There are some, however, that would disagree, claiming that this battle was the culmination of local rebels that were frustrated with the local government and not an open rebellion against the crown. North Carolina wasn't founded until 1663, when Charles II granted 8 of his closest friends and allies a tract of land. The 8 Lord Proprietors were Edward Hyde, George Monk, William Lord Craven, John Berkeley, Anthony Ashley Cooper, Sir George Carteret, Sir William Berkeley, and Sir John Colleton. They were each granted the land south of Virginia to Spanish Florida and west of the South Seas, which was an unknown amount because no one had traveled that far. The Carolina Charter of 1663 gave the proprietors the ability to create towns, which included governments and the ability to punish crime. It also gave the citizens the same rights as English citizens as granted in Magna Carta. However, because the land was split between 8 men, the land became unstable. To make it more stable, the proprietors passed the Fundamental Constitutions of 1669. Written by John Locke, secretary to the proprietors, this document set a more republican form of government than the Carolina Charter. It included details on the creation of executive offices like Chief Justice, Constable, and Treasurer. Each office would be assigned by the proprietors. It also lays out how the land will be divided amongst the proprietors and how they will rule them. It established local courts and a trial by jury and gave the citizens the right to representation based on population. The courts were run by the sitting governor. Land disputes, contract law, and property rights were the cases seen at this general court. Common law writs were the fundamentals used by local attorneys. The English found this to be a very radical way to govern. Eventually, the fundamental constitutions failed, the main reason being that there were not enough people to fill the seats as required. The land was riddled with conflict. Constant fights with Indians, disputes with Virginia, and piracy caused the proprietors to fail to enforce the law of England. After this, all but Sir George Carteret transferred their lands back to the Crown in 1728. The following years leading up to the Revolution created more strife for the settlers of North Carolina. Many of the disputes between landowners were handled in local courts instead of a central court. Only a few landowners in regular interaction with provincial government. Disputes arose between the Granville district and those surrounding it. The lack of a stable government eventually led to the formation of the Regulators. Unfair representation and exorbitant taxation from the local governments for routine services spurred numerous protests from local people. After the peaceful protests did not work, they turned violent. On the morning of May 16, 1771, Tryon sent his troops out to a field just outside the Regulator encampment. He formed 2 lines and divided his artillery between the wings and the center of the first line. The Regulators were disorganized and without leadership. Their elected leader, Herman Husband, was a devout Quaker and thus did not take part in the battle. The government sent a proclamation to the encampment asking them to lay down their arms and surrender their leaders. The Regulators refused and the battle ensued. The losses were disputed on the side of Governor Tryon, but the losses of the Regulators were 9 dead and approximately 200 wounded. Tryon took 13 prisoners and 6 were hanged for their crimes later. The rest of the reported Regulators were required to take an oath to the Crown, which, we see them later, called into action at the Battle of Moores Creek. Although the battle had relatively few losses and ended with a victory for the British, many historians are saying that this battle was a mirror of the strife and rebellion seen across much of the British territories, and it even spurred many to follow suit. Pictured here are the 8 Lord Proprietors. They were Edward Hyde, George Monk, William Lord Craven, John Lord Berkeley, Anthony Ashley Cooper, Sir George Carteret, Sir William Berkeley, and Sir John Colleton. Pictured here is the Royal Governor, Lord Tryon. This is his palace at Newburgh, North Carolina, where he moved the capital of the state here to his palace. This is a map of the Battle of Alamance. Although it is hard to read, you can see where the battle would be difficult because of the rivers and landscape.